Everybody knows that the dice are loaded. Everybody rolls with their fingers crossed. Everybody knows the war is over. Everybody knows the good guys lost. Everybody knows the fight was fixed. The poor stay poor, the rich get rich. That's how it goes. Everybody knows.
Hey everybody, this is John with another installment of Think Culture, and you were just listening to Leonard Cohen's Everybody Knows, which is a great song. He's one of the greatest lyricists of all time. This is one of my favorite songs. And the tone of the song is very defeatist. You know, it's resigned. Everybody knows that the good guys lose, and everything's crap, and everyone lies, and the rich just always get richer, and the poor get poorer, and you know, there's nothing good ever happens, and the war's already lost. You know, there's no possibility for any kind of transformation that would finally end the misery and the horror and the stagnation. You know, that's kind of the attitude of the song, and I think that it captures kind of the attitude of the age, and it captures the idea of cynical reason. And of course, you know, in the previous video, we talked about Critique of Cynical Reason, Peter Sloterdijk. I gave kind of an exposition of the content of that book. And that was in the theoretical series. So today we're going to just be discussing it, right? In a more casual way, and to talk about the applicability of that analysis to the present historical moment. And demonstrate something about the relevance of reading works of philosophy, paying attention to them, the fact that it isn't a purely masturbatory exercise, although sometimes it may feel that way, in multiple ways. it can be pleasurable, you know, a pleasurable experience. But in any case, I'm gonna recap a little bit the book now. And just give kind of a quick summary, and then I'm going to turn to some recent discussions and stuff that I've had in the real world, I think, and use them as examples to show the degree to which I think that this analysis is pertinent. So to kind of recap really quickly, traditionally the idea of the Enlightenment is like we engage in this great debate. Everything gets subjected to critical reason, and in this way, you know, ultimately we discover truth. We get to the foundations of things. We obtain knowledge. That's the idea. And the idea is that with this knowledge comes the possibility of transforming the world, of creating a new and better world, better institutions, a more just, better society in which human beings are more well cared for and are allowed to flourish. This is a process by which we escape what Kant called our self-imposed immaturity. Right, that's what he described the Enlightenment as an escape from. Right, and of course, Critique of Cynical Reason is the title is an allusion to Kant. So the idea is enlightenment. In enlightenment, we become adults. You know, we know ourselves, we know the world, we put that knowledge to work, and we take possession of ourselves and our destiny. Kant thinks about this in terms of becoming autonomous. Right? He's allergic to the idea of heteronomy. This is why he's opposed to Spinoza, right? This idea of heteronomous determination. He thinks that we ought to guide ourselves. We ought to be guided, self-determining, you know, allow ourselves to be guided by reason in our thoughts and our actions. That's the idea of the Enlightenment. And for Sloterdijk, it doesn't quite work out that way. Enlightenment, he sees as more of a kind of polemical process, war dialectic. The debate, the great debate, is in fact a political confrontation where two sides subject their opponents to critique. Critical reason is applied to their opponents in a way that winds up doing what Sloterdijk refers to as unmasking them. They expose their opponent's false consciousness. That's the idea. You know, your opponent's wrong, so you expose them as either lying, being deceived themselves, being enthralled to a particular ideology. They're just pursuing money, power, fame, whatever the case. You expose in them then the sort of hidden dimension that generates the error, the lie, the falsity. You shine light, on them, on their idea, in order to see the reality of the thing, its foundations, its essential untruth. In the case of the falsity of your opponent. And the first targets are like the concept of revelation, the church, the clergy, the monarchy, aristocrats, bourgeoisie. It runs kind of through the gamut, just sort of descending the vertical axis, subjecting eventually everything and everyone to this attack. And so Sloterdijk says that at the end of this process, surprise, we don't reach firm foundations for knowledge. We don't build up a kind of science of everything that allows us to construct a perfect world. We don't find truth, capital T. No, in fact, it turns out that just everything gets exposed. Critical reason demolishes everyone and everything and leaves nothing in its wake. Right? Just the detritus of our former illusions. We don't get truth then, we get universal falsity, universal deception. Nothing survives the critique. The light has penetrated every corner of the world and of the human soul, and we see instead that every idea of the good, of the true, of the beautiful, all of it has warts. All of it is illusion. The whole of the world, in fact, was an illusion, and without illusion, we have nothing left, it turns out. Once everything is exposed as an illusion, we simply have nothing. And so we wind up, therefore, he says, in this position of what he calls cynical reason. He glosses it as enlightened false consciousness. As we saw in the previous video, we exposed all the false consciousness, right? All the false consciousness that abounds in the world, that animates everybody and their actions in this life. And so we become enlightened. This is the telos of the Enlightenment project. We achieved it. And we do know, therefore, we come into knowledge. It's just that what we know is that everything is BS and everything's an illusion and there's nothing more than that. We know that we should suspect everyone and everything as a deception because deception lurks everywhere. Everyone is a deceiver. Everything's suspect. We no longer believe in anything objective at all. We gave up on any idea of finding the good, the true, the beautiful, and we think instead everything is about self-interest or something. Everyone's just pursuing their self-interest. But he says that this isn't just enlightened, it's also a kind of the final form of false consciousness. We tell ourselves, our self-conception, is that this cynicism is what remains after naivety has been purged. But in fact, this form of reason, he shows us, is even more naive. Because despite the pervasive doubt about everything, nevertheless, we still have to live our lives. We have to think and act in the world. We have to go about things. And so we do so. We do so with a set of illusions. We do what one does, what Das Man does, which takes me back to the Leonard Cohen thing, the idea that everybody knows, right? One simply knows. One simply knows that everything's an illusion. Das Man knows that everything's an illusion. It's kind of the background, average everydayness of the inauthentic man. This is the background of everything that we do, right? The sort of base conception of the world and of ourselves. We have this set of illusions. Everything's an illusion. But we still have to act. We act as one does. So like as Zizek describes ideology, he says they know very well what they're doing, but they're doing it anyway. That's how we have to live our lives now. We know that what we're doing is false, is rooted in error, but we don't think there's really any alternative. Everything else is an illusion anyway, so we just sort of have to live our lives as frauds, more or less aware of the fact that we are frauds, and we know that fraud abounds. And, we're on guard against deception because we're so wise and we're so clever, but we're also then naive. Because now, in fact, there are no conditions required to get us to believe anything at all, or to get us to disbelieve anything at all. Any attempt to convince us is a priori rendered impotent because we know, we think we know, that it's merely another attempt to deceive us. Any evidence we're provided, we're suspicious of. What are the motives? Why are you telling me this? What does this mean? There's got to be some motive here. You've got to be, what are you going to get out of this? All evidence is an attempt to deceive. So we can't be convinced. We can't be reformed. Critique is thereby neutered. Critique which guides the Enlightenment, which is the ultimate weapon of the Enlightenment, ultimately, at the end of the process of enlightenment, has no power. It's destroyed everything, and it leaves us with nothing. And then it becomes useless. And then falsity is a permanent sort of accepted condition of our life. We can't learn new values or shift paradigms. We can't become convinced of new ideas because all of it is a fraud. You know, you just want me to believe X, Y, or Z so that you can get some kind of sick satisfaction, some money, some power, whatever. You know, or you're just somebody else's pawn. You know, you don't know it, but you're operating on the basis of somebody else's illusions or somebody else's desire for power. You know, we're just involved in this universal con game. You know, conning is everywhere. Conning happens all the time to everybody. We're all doing it. And so in this way, he says people actually wind up becoming more dogmatic because they can't be reasoned with. Whatever they happen to have picked up as their beliefs or whatever, they're invulnerable to critique. And so they function as some kind of unquestionable axiom of faith that can't be challenged. And so I think this analysis of Sloterdijk really hits the mark, and it helps to make sense of the world today. It provides valuable insight into our historical situation and the sorry state of our public discourse. Very sorry. And you know, he illustrates, I think, quite well how this cynical reason actually is itself a naivety, and it disempowers us, and it makes us actually easier to manipulate and to control. Particularly, I think, in our like social media age. The other day, I was watching Ronnie Chang's special on Netflix. I think his name's Ronnie Chang. A while back, and he said at one point, and this has really stuck with me, who would have thought that all the information in the world would make us so stupid? And I think the internet really amplifies cynicism and its effects. I think Sloterdijk would have predicted it. He would have predicted that it would make us that stupid. We're drowning in different perspectives, different sources of information, different narratives, different websites or whatever. And so it's just easier and more natural than ever to throw your hands up in the air and kind of say, well, anything and everything gets said. Facts abound supporting every possible position. They get articulated from every region. Every possible belief has its representatives. And so it's easy to get exposed to these like idiotic beliefs, and you just sort of pick them up. You master the associated discourse. You believe what you believe. I believe what I believe. Man, it's all just your opinion. I hear that kind of thing very frequently. That's the idea. That's how we get stupid. So you get turned on to flat Earth or whatever, and you see some stuff about it online. It sounds cool. Boom. You're a flat earther, and you can't be reasoned out of it because it's just another perspective. It's no one has access to the truth. It's all just he said, she said. To take a more controversial and topical example, we could look, for example, at Black Lives Matter. My wife and I were having a conversation with a third party the other day about Black Lives Matter, and our companion was asking about whether or not we supported Black Lives Matter, and my wife, she was saying no, and that their narrative is a lie. For example, the hands up, don't shoot thing, it's a lie. And it gets repeated like a mantra. Nevertheless, she suggested this person look into it, research it, read about the DOJ reports, etc., look into police shooting stats. And the response that we got from this person was basically, well, there's no point in looking into it because you can find information supporting any position anyway, and any information that says anything and supports any view at all. And I bring this up not to criticize that person, but to say that I think this constitutes the dominant view, and it's an example of cynical reason and its function, in the real world. There are tons of people who still think that Michael Brown was like shot in the back, hands up, saying, please don't shoot me, unarmed, not resisting. But the forensic evidence, the medical examiner's report, the DOJ report, eyewitness testimony, it's all very conclusive about the fact that did not happen. It all points in the direction of he was going for the cop, trying to struggle for his gun, etc. and so forth. But the people who think that it was hands up, don't shoot, they can't be convinced. You can't change their mind because they don't trust the forensics or the medical examiner or the DOJ or the police officer or anything. Because everyone lies. Everything is deception. Everyone is motivated to tell you some story. And so they think that you can find evidence to support every possible view and every possible position. And so they aren't interested in looking into it. Why even look for evidence? Why even look it up? Why research it? You link them to the DOJ report and they don't care. They won't read it. Because it and everything else is BS. Okay? And we have universal deception. But that doesn't mean that they're ever going to drop the view, that they're ever going to stop going around saying hands up, don't shoot happened. Even though they won't try to support it or won't look into it, they'll still go around repeating it. They still sort of believe it. They just can't be dissuaded from that belief because the conditions for believing it, for believing one thing or another, they aren't available. They're suspicious. There is no truth. So they actually are absurdly naive. They can be convinced of something for which there is zero evidence and a mountain of counter evidence, and they can be convinced to the point of it being like a religious dogma. They believe it sort of on faith, not on the basis of reason, because reason is, as you know, just sort of self-interested, post hoc rationalizations of things that we already are doing. We already believe of our self-interest, So they can be convinced of anything at all. When all the information in the world runs counter to what they believe, it still doesn't matter. And this isn't just how the way BLM works. It's the way everything works, and it basically is how everyone thinks and how everyone acts in the world and lives their life, because our age is characterized by this pervasive, cynical reason. So I hear stuff like that all the time. I had an argument the other day, for example, with a very intelligent person about some witness testimony during the Ukraine hearings. And they told me that a witness made a certain claim, and I remembered them saying something totally the opposite of that, so I found the video and I sent it to them, and I even was hedging. I was nice. I was like, okay, I'll assume that you're telling the truth and that they said the thing that you're saying, okay? At least for rhetorical purposes. But I sent you this video of them saying what appears to be the opposite. So what is the crucial context I'm missing? How do I interpret this in order to make sense of it, given that apparent contradiction, right? Seems fair enough. They wouldn't even look at the video. We don't even need deep fakes. Everyone's afraid of the coming deep fake. But we don't need them. No one believes direct video evidence anyway. That's how incredibly cynical we are, and how dangerously naive and how easy to manipulate we are, how easy to indoctrinate, because everything is just people's opinions. Everyone's duped. So you believe that, I believe this, and it's whatever, man. Why is your dupe better than my dupe? You have your reasons, I have my reasons. Reason is just this sort of free-floating set of post hoc rationalizations. They can be used to support your beliefs or mine or any beliefs. So just stick to whatever was successfully sort of inculcated in you, and there's no need to verify, research, back up claims, think. There's no need to apply critical reason anymore. And so all of our political discourse seems to operate like this. And we just spend all our time instead just trying to unmask each other. But it's accelerated, this unmasking. It's amplified. And yet it's become hollow. And because everyone's wearing a mask anyway. We all know that. Everyone can be unmasked. So it's pointless. It's a totally pointless exercise. We don't unmask with the idea that we can learn something through the unmasking. That's how the Enlightenment functioned. Instead, it's sort of like the unmasking itself we understand as just, another kind of deception or power grab. We unmask them as being unjustified, but we don't really think we have any justifications either. We haven't even thought about it. We think everyone is selfish, everyone is motivated, and so we just sort of endlessly try to reveal each other's motivations, and that's our public discourse now. That's all it is, and it's so annoying. I can't stand it. Everyone's a hypocrite. Everyone is constantly accusing each other of being a hypocrite. Everyone's a grifter. That became a very popular word recently. Everyone justifies their opponent's hypocrisy or their opponent's grift by they justify their own grift or their own hypocrisy by pointing to their opponents. Everyone gets accused of acting in bad faith. What a stupid accusation. Everyone says everyone else is interested only in power or material wealth or whatever. That's the explanation. It's the only explanation ever given for everything. Literally everything. We can't think outside of this sort of narrow, cynical, deeply stupid, set of ideas. Nothing could possibly, because we have a deep, serious dispute about what is good, the nature of justice, what the truth of the matter is. It couldn't be that we're convinced of something on a principled basis and that we need to have it out and adduce warrants and compile evidence and go through it in order to support our positions and try to convince each other. No, that's not possible. That would be naive. We're beyond that. We're wise. We're deep, intelligent people. We're cynical, We deploy cynical reason. So instead, you just, reduce everyone else's position to an interest in power, money, clicks, whatever else, and that's how all of our debates in the public sphere go. You don't actually address their points. You don't actually address their argument or mount a counter argument, because that'd be naive. Why go through the trouble of doing all that anyway when they don't even believe what they think? They're grifters, right? They're doing it in bad faith. So why would I even waste my time and effort interacting with them or debating with them? They're just being deceptive, and we can never get to the truth anyway. Our media is saturated with deception, with fake news. All presentations of information are always just sort of a grift. So how could we possibly arbit our dispute anyway? To what authority could we appeal? The other day I was watching some Kulinski, and he was claiming that Tucker isn't really a populist. He's a fraud. I hear this a lot, particularly about Tucker. And now Kyle didn't make an argument. He didn't critique any of Tucker's positions. He didn't bring up any of his statements and subject them to any kind of any scrutiny, right? He just says Tucker's a fraud. He doesn't really believe the populist stuff that he says. And I just sit there, I'm like, what does that mean? I don't know what it means. If what Tucker says on his show is populist, that's admitted. Kyle Kulinski admits it, but he doesn't actually believe it? That's the idea? He doesn't believe what he says? He has bad motives? See, it's this attempt at unmasking rather than engaging in reasoned debate or dialogue. But let's go ahead and break this down, right? Tucker either believes what he says or he doesn't. If he believes it, then he's a populist. We're done. No more discussion, right? Because he says populist things. But if he doesn't believe it, then we have to ask ourselves, why does he nevertheless say it? Saying it will have an effect. What effect will it have? Well, the effect can't be to reduce support for populist positions and populist policies, right? It can only increase support for them. Like, for example, if he talks about the credit card companies and their rates being predatory, right, and needing to cap them at a certain level in order to prevent abuse, whether he believes that or not, whether he's really committed to an anti-predatory rates ideology or something, he's still saying it, and saying it if it changes minds it can only change minds in the direction of people coming into thinking that it's predatory, right? And that rates should be fixed. So if he doesn't believe it, then why is he saying that? Why is he doing that? Something that has to have the effect of convincing people to believe what he doesn't, right? At worst, I guess, it's got to be some kind of compromise or something. But, a compromise that he's making with populists. But then what's the issue? If he's compromised and is pushing a populist agenda, at least on these particular issues or whatever, what's the issue? What other issues can you point to where he's not saying them? If he says other things that are not populist, you can debate those things, bring them up on your show. Whether or not it's a concession, he's helping the populist agenda, at least on these specific points. So who cares? If you're a populist, why does it matter if he's a fraud? Why do his motives matter? Why are we talking and thinking and imagining how Tucker must feel deep down? And I had the same sort of debate, actually, with Douglas Lain at Zero Books. We were talking about Tucker Carlson and his opinion on immigration. And Douglas consented to the fact that the argument that Tucker was articulating was explicitly pro-working class, and it was the same kind of argument that organized labor in this country has sort of always made, and there's even a socialist could easily get behind it and has in the past, right? So that's that. You would think, that means that you have to be like, okay, well, I can see where he's coming from at least, but no! Because Douglas felt the need to say, nevertheless, that although all that's true, Tucker nevertheless, quote, isn't a friend of the working class. And he takes that position, therefore, not to benefit the working class, but because he's a racist. That was what I was told. Isn't that an insane thing to say? I hear this sort of thing all the time. Yes, that's a fine pro-working class position. The argument makes sense. It's the traditional working class argument, but we ought to reject it and the person making it because they only actually think that because they're a racist. I pushed him on it, and he said that he knows that he got there from racism, basically because he isn't a Marxist. So if a guy agrees with you on a policy but isn't a Marxist, doesn't share, isn't an avowed member of whatever your political party is or whatever, then he must have morally reprehensible motivations, and he should be rejected. Isn't it weird that someone can get to your views just by being a racist? If that is what you think, what does that say about your politics? If somebody can come up and be like, hey, I agree with you about everything because I'm a racist. Maybe that should provoke some kind of reflection on your part, But, moreover, what does it matter? I don't understand what it would matter anyway, If I want some policy, because I'm a great person, presumably, and he wants the same policy, but because he's a terrible person, then that policy position is strengthened anyway. Maybe we can work together to get it done. It must have broad support. If it can rally behind it, terrible people and good people motivated for opposite reasons, then it's a good cause probably, right? And we can get something done. It's awesome. We should work together to do it. If someone shares your politics, but for reasons you despise or reasons you imagine, right? You don't know. You imagine that they have reasons you despise. I don't know what difference it makes. I have this friend on the left that I've been having some arguments with recently, and he keeps sort of talking like this too. He has this refrain of, "Do you think these people care about you?" That's what he always asks me. Do you think they care about you? And I'm just like, what? What do I care if they care about me? Why is that my concern? Is what we want from our leaders and our politicians that they care about us? Is that what we want from our spokesmen, right? From people lobbying on our behalf or whatever? Do we want them to care about us, or do we want them to pursue the policy agenda we support? Is the role of a politician in a democracy to care? Or is it, I don't know, to enact the will of the people? Or the common good of their constituents, right? Because I feel like this latter stuff, that's really what their job is. It isn't to care. They're not my mommy, you know. But again, it's this weird sort of cynical reason. The only thing we care about is the unmasking, you know, is their deep motivations or whatever. It's they're motivated to believe whatever. We don't care what they say they believe. That's a lie. That's a fiction. But deep down they have whatever interests, you know. It's this weird cynical reason, you know. It's to unmask people as ultimately uncaring, and as though that should matter. You know, we undermine their motives. We don't debate their ideas. But in my mind, you know, if you have a politician who's motivated purely by self-interests, but invariably they do what's right for the country, then I feel like, well, why do I care that he only does it for himself? You know, should we care that they only do it for themselves? I don't, frankly, at all. I mean, who cares why they're doing a good job if in fact they are doing a good job? But, you know, no, they have to be suspected, you know, even if it could be proven, which basically it never can. You know, they're doing it because they're deceptive, because they're frauds. You know, that's what we're concerned about, whether or not they're fraudulently pursuing what is good and valuable. You know, for me, I mean, even then, if your grift is to spread ideas that I like, right, that I think are good, then, you know, please continue grifting. I hope that you don't stop with your grift. And if you do it, if you spread ideas that I don't like with your grift, then it seems to me that I should be talking about why I don't like those ideas and trying to you know, to fight you on that, to counter those arguments, to spread counter arguments myself. I don't think I'm going to be effective if I just run around accusing you of faking it, you know, even if in fact you are faking it. We're all faking it, right? That's the idea. But anyway, these are just some, you know, just some application, some thinking about contemporary public life within the context of Peter Sloterdijk's analysis of cynical reason, which I think is relevant. I think it's interesting, and I think it explains a lot, and that it's valuable, and it starts to point us in a direction, if we take it seriously, that I think is wholesome and productive, and that's where we should go. And he does this, he talks about it more, again, to preview in Spheres. We get a better kind of an explanation, I think, of where we ought to go, you know, of general immunology, right? I'll say it to what is it called? Like social air conditioning or something like that. That has to become our dominant concern in how we interact with the world and how we engage in public life. You know, that has to be our direction according to Spheres, and we will see that. I'll do it. It's gonna happen. It's gonna be complex, but it's gonna happen. But anyway, that was John. Thank you for joining me with this chat. It was nice. Questions, comments, criticism, very welcome. Although don't you dare challenge my motives. Anyway, remember, don't simply react to culture, but to think culture.